Welcome to the TA Disruptors podcast. I'm Robert Newry, CEO and co-founder of Arctic Shores, the task-based psychometric company that helps companies uncover potential and see more in people. This is the third series of the TA Disruptors podcast, and we are focusing on the impact of Gen AI and what that means for recruiters and how they can navigate this very fast-paced and dynamic development. And today I'm very excited to be welcoming Martin Redstone, somebody who I've known for a long time now and have the highest respect for in many aspects actually, but not least most recently for your very insightful and thoughtful perspectives on the impact of AI. And Martin is the founder of PeopleBots and co-founder of GenAssess, which we'll hear a little bit more about later. You have a lot of experience and expertise in the HR sector. I'm seeing over 18 years, which out-trumps me in terms of time in this sector. But you've worked with some really impressive companies in the past, like RoboRecruiter and Reed, and so you have this sort of very interesting balance of perspective of both being in the recruitment world, but also part of the tech developments that we've seen over the years. You're also the author of one of my favourite weekly newsletters, where you explore how AI has inserted itself into HR in the aptly named HAI.R, hair. And one of the things that always makes me smile when I see your newsletter arrive is that I am still waiting for the time when AI will find a way to improve the way we might be able to get more hair on our heads.
That'd be wonderful.
In time. So that'll be the true mark of the arrival of AI. But welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Martin.
Real pleasure to be here. Finally.
Yes, we have lots to talk about and share.
Yes.
We exchange a lot on LinkedIn and other areas on this very interesting topic of the AI-enabled candidate. And that's where I'd like to start today. So this is something that has, I think, been a transformation in the recruitment sector that we've not seen before. Mm-hmm. So we're at this sort of pivot point where now the candidate has at their fingertips the same power that the recruiters have.
Yep.
And we've never seen that before. It's always been heavily weighted to the recruiter in terms of technology and ability to screen and outwit the candidate to some extent. So I would love to hear your perspective on the AI-enabled candidate and what are some of the things that you've come across that it might be interesting to share with people about how that balance of power has shifted.
It's interesting because candidates have always been enabled in different ways. And, we go back to the days when people had to post in their CVs and all of a sudden email came around and
yes.
we enabled them to be able to deliver those kind of things quicker and enabled them to find jobs quicker through job boards rather than looking at newspapers. So there's always been times when candidates have been able to take advantage of changes in the way that we do things. But now this is just completely different. This has taken the best career coach, the best CV writer that you can get and placed it into the hands of everybody, not just the few, everybody, because even free versions of Gen AI tools are good enough to really change the way that people represent themselves and present themselves. And so it's had a massive impact, as we know, on the power dynamics, like you talk about, between the candidate and the recruiter, and it's scared a lot of recruiters, I think, because they're not used to losing that power, especially right at the beginning of the process. We can map out power dynamics across the entire recruitment process, but it's always been at the beginning, especially at the top of the funnel. the power dynamics have always been with the recruiter.
Yes.
Yeah, because they're the people that make that first decision, and that's no longer the case. It's dragged back pre that in the process, and so it's very interesting, very, very interesting.
It is,
Yeah.
and I think there are a couple of points around that power dynamic shift. So one is this ability now to mass personalize. So as you alluded to there, the tools now enable a candidate to create the perfect CV, to create the perfect cover letter in a way that was really quite hard to do beforehand. You need some expertise to it. Now it's like using a calculator.
Yep.
Everybody's got access to it. I think one of the other interesting dynamics that has happened alongside that is I don't know whether you call it the sort of Amazonification of recruitment, so that it's the one-click apply now.
Yes.
So that the recruiters, in an effort to make it really easy to attract any and every candidate, have now found themselves sort of caught in a little bit of a trap.
Yes.
Which is, you've got LinkedIn one-click apply, and now the candidates have also got the ability to personalize it and send it in to anybody and everybody while they sleep.
Yeah, we're the victims of our own innovation, as it were. The one-click apply was a necessity because it was too difficult to apply. We go back to the old school ATSs where you had to set up your own profile. You had to set up logins even before you were even able to apply, and that was causing a lot of challenges and a lot of drop-offs and a lot of hurdles in the application process. So the advent of the one-click apply was to try and overcome that challenge. And now what we're seeing is organizations such as AI Apply and all those kind of solutions that are able to now offer almost agentic application processes to candidates, where give us your standard CV, give us your LinkedIn profile, tell us what you're looking for, where you're looking for, remote, non-remote, etc. And we'll go away and we'll find hundreds of appropriate jobs that match your profile, and we'll apply to hundreds of jobs for you because we can do that on a one click. And so I loved the description of it as a DDoS attack on recruitment.
Yes.
And for me that aptly, as a verified nerd and computer science graduate, that for me absolutely explained what's happening here.
It is, and I think it was when you first shared that on LinkedIn too, and just I suppose for some people to explain that sort of DDoS, but it's what malevolent agents used as a sort of denial of service or a way of trying to bring down websites
by overwhelming them with traffic, basically. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, so whilst this isn't an attempt to overwhelm the recruitment process, the effect that it's having from a recruiter's perspective is exactly that. We're seeing jobs taken down quicker than ever before because application numbers are going up and up and up, and so having to say after almost 24 hours, actually we have to stop now, we've had enough applications. And the impacts of that are just, there are so many impacts. It's multi-dimensional, whether it be being overwhelmed as a recruiter, whether it be not being able to find the perfect candidate, whether it be candidates who are putting all their faith in an AI tool that might hallucinate about them. There's just so many dimensions of challenges with this process that it does feel quite overwhelming.
Yes, yeah. And it is a big problem, and one that I'm not sure that people have fully appreciated, although you and I have spent some time over the last 12 months warning of this tsunami of applications that's going to come through the pipe for most recruiters, and they're now seeing it. I mean, I heard of one example the other day of a tech company that had 12,000 applications last year for their 500 or so jobs, 45,000 this year.
Yes.
And I think the Institute of Student Employers recently said too, the average number of applications for every graduate role out there has gone up 60%. So it's clearly a big problem.
Yeah.
And so I've seen three camps emerge in how people are trying to deal with this problem, and I would love to get your perspective on those three camps. We've got the sort of fight back camp, who are saying, right, this is bad, I'm going to deter and detect it, and I don't want people using AI. We've got the freeze camp who go, this is just too much, I'm overwhelmed with all information, I'm going to wait to see what happens on this. And then we've got the friend camp who go, okay, this is the way of the future, so I need to get ahead of it. So let's just start with the fight camp. And
it's my favourite one.
Yes, you posted this week a very interesting piece of research that came out, and perhaps you could share a bit on that, on this whole deter and detect, because that seems to me the only if you're going to fight this, and that there may be good reasons for saying why you don't want people to use AI, but it pushes you down the route of I have to deter and detect it.
Yes.
Because there's no other, you can't fight it another way. You can't say to people, don't use it, and then not have a means of being able to enforce whether somebody's used it or not.
Yeah.
So what are the problems?
Well, I mean, there are. So I've seen a lot of different ways of trying to deter and detect it. If we remove the detect for a second, because I know that's a big conversation point as well, but on the deter piece, I've seen lots of examples of organisations who are asking candidates to tick a box to say, I've not used AI in my application. They've given an explanation such as, we want to see your true self, all those kind of things, and you have to guarantee commitment that you have not used AI. And like you said, even if you click that, there's no way of policing that.
Yes.
There's no way of, even down the line, and it's a question I posed to an organisation that had on their career page, if you are found to be using AI, we will either reject you from the application process and you'll never be able to apply here or work here ever again. And I said, well, what if somebody gets the job and then 6 months later says, it slips into a conversation that their CV was created by ChatGPT? And they said, right. And I said, well, is that in your disciplinary process? Is there a process for booting them out? No, not really. No, we haven't really thought about that. So, this is the problem with knee-jerk reactions.
Because it's not a criminal offence.
It's not a criminal offence. No, in the same way, it's not a criminal offence to pay somebody $50 to get them to write your CV for you, or to use a spell checker on Word, or use Grammarly or anything like that.
Yes.
And so, and then we've got the detect issue, and I've been talking about this for longer than I can remember now, because people and very, very quickly post ChatGPT coming into our lives and GPT-4 coming into our lives last March, very quickly we had in the recruitment industry people peddling detectors.
Yes.
And their marketing was, we're at 99+% accuracy in detecting AI generated text, and they weren't. And this was my challenge, but this was my challenge back to them, and none of them ever gave me an answer on this, which was OpenAI in January last year launched their own text classifier, which was supposed to be able to determine text that was generated by ChatGPT. At launch, it was 26% accurate. 26, which is pretty good. And I tested several of them around that time, and it was 26% accurate. And even by their own admission, on their PR, it was 26. But they launched it knowing and publicly saying it was 26% accurate.
I thought you were going to say like 80% accurate.
No, these are the people that created ChatGPT, could only get to 26% accuracy, and it never got any better. And then in July last year, they sunsetted it. They quietly just shut it down. So if OpenAI can't make something that can accurately detect AI-generated text, what hope has a RegTech provider got?
Yes.
And so, and there's lots of technical reasons why it's very difficult to detect AI-generated text. There's even prompting that can just beat any detector. I tell people openly, there's a prompt which is write with a high degree of perplexity and burstiness.
Yes.
You put that in your
I love that.
And it just it will destroy every detector.
Yes.
You can't detect it.
But why burstiness? I just out of interest. I love that term.
It's a great term, isn't it?
Not one I would have
so,
thought.
So the way that AI tools are designed to write is with a high degree of, dare we say, kind of probability, repeated patterns, and those kind of things. And so when you start writing with a high degree of perplexity and burstiness, you're actually writing not in those kind of patterns. Your repetitiveness reduces, your your patterns of language reduce down, and so, or in fact, go up. Sorry, and so the AI detector immediately will say, well, that's human generated text because it's not written in the way that AI would expect it to.
Yes.
And so use that prompt, and you'll beat an AI detector every single time. And I tell people that openly.
So the detection tools, it's just an arms race of AI against AI. In fact, it's not even an arms race, because actually they're relying on you not prompting your AI response to be more human-like. And the moment that you do that, they can't detect it.
Exactly, but it also brings up some other issues, and you saw this week in the in the research that I pointed to in my newsletter, and I sent you as well privately, is that the false positives issue is there as well, and I've been talking about this for ages as well, to say, okay, well, what if you do have one of these detectors that isn't actually that accurate, and it falsely detects AI generated text, and you kick somebody out of the process? You're opening yourselves up to a whole world of lawsuits and all those kind of things. But not only that, I think the most pressing thing that came out of that report for me wasn't just about the fact that you have to screen 1,000 CVs to get a decent number coming through. It's the fact that when you look at people who don't have English as their first language, when you look at neurodiverse, all those kind of things, that people write in a certain style, whether it be because it's not their first language, or it's because they're a very methodical person and they write very methodically, whether that be from neurodiversity or whether it just be from somebody like myself who's an engineer by trade and is quite methodical.
Yes.
You're opening up some real issues when it comes to bias and actually reducing down the diversity of your pipeline by incorrectly using AI detectors.
So that creates a big problem then, because if you can't rely on the AI detectors, because either they can be easily outmaneuvered or they give you false positives, then what are you left with? I did challenge some of the Big Four accountants on this, because they came out earlier this year, largely because the financial regulatory body that oversees them said the integrity and authenticity of your process is going to be undermined by AI unless you are very clear in removing it from the process. So they were almost required to say, well, you can't use AI. So what are they left with then if the tools aren't there to help them? And it will come a little bit later about sort of redesigning the process. But if you are got your current process and you can't change it, what are you left with then in trying to? Because you're saying that the deter bit doesn't really help, because that's an integrity type of question.
Yeah.
And there's all these TikTok reels out there of showing how people managed to bypass it and they weren't detected. So what are we left with in trying to send a message where you still want the integrity and the authenticity of the process to be protected and maintained?
Yeah, I mean, not much, unfortunately.
Yes, probably right.
and when you talk about things like the Big Four, I really struggle with this, because I know that the Big Four are using generative AI tools in their workplace, and I had a conversation recently with a publisher, a newspaper publisher, who were asking me about, they obviously hire journalists, and their concern is how do we stop journalists when we send them the take home work? How do we stop them from using ChatGPT? And I was actually talking to them because they were asking me to help them enable them, because they have just spent a load of money on ChatGPT Enterprise for the organization.
Right.
And I was saying, well, you're asking people to not use ChatGPT in the application process or generative AI tools, because there are others out there within the application process. But on day one, on their IT induction, they're given access to ChatGPT. So I feel like there's this big kind of imbalance or chasm between what an organization needs out of somebody and what they're trying to do when they're trying to bring people into the organization. So it's very, very interesting. I don't think to go back to your answer, I don't think there's much left for people to do if they're trying to deter people. I think they're left with having to put blind faith in people, which
Yes.
I don't think is a great idea. But ultimately, you're saying tick a box here to tell us you haven't used AI.
Yes.
And I've never seen a box on any application form that says tick a box here to tell us you haven't used external support to create your CV, or you haven't been to a career counsellor, or you haven't downloaded the best
Good point.
CV template that you can find out there. It's
Or you haven't used spell check
You
if
haven't-
you're
exactly.
dyslexic or dyspraxic.
Yeah,
You're right. It's fraught with
Yes.
challenges the more that you start thinking it through. And I was on this week a panel for the UCL where the careers team there had invited myself plus a few employers to speak to students and talk to them about how they should use generative AI as part of the application process. And one of the students sent in a question saying, I didn't know it was a he or a she, but they had applied to a law firm for a vacation scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a box in there that said, how have you used AI to support your application? And so they asked the question then back to the panel, what am I supposed to answer? It feels like a game of Jeopardy now. Is this an integrity question? In which case, why am I just asked at the beginning saying, is this an authentic application?
Yeah.
Why is it just referring to Gen AI, as you highlighted earlier? Or is it I'm looking for people, and some of the, I spoke to a large management consultancy who, like you, the first thing they do when they onboard them is get them into Microsoft Copilot.
Yep.
And then they have an intense course on that, and then they go out and train other people within the organization. So in their case, when they think about people using Gen AI skills in the recruitment process, they think it's a good thing because they want to know, are you forward looking and thinking, and because we want people with those skills. And so you're left with, well, what am I supposed to answer? Or is it the worst bit, which I hadn't thought about, which then came out, is this a honey trap where if I tick it, I'm immediately going to be excluded from this, and it's trying to catch me out?
Well, you raise a really interesting point, because if we talk about candidate integrity, but we need to think about employer integrity as well. And one of the biggest things in AI that I talk to people about is transparency.
Yes.
But transparency doesn't just belong to AI when it comes to the recruitment process. I think you should be transparent totally around how the recruitment process happens. I think the best employers are the people, the best recruiters are the people that say, look, here's what our process looks like, here's what you can expect.
Totally
so if you've got a question like that, tell people why you're asking
Yes.
that question. Otherwise, like you said, it's going to leave people sitting there going, well, I've got Sophie's choice here. Is it a good thing to say yes or a bad thing to say yes? And so it's, and look, without being facetious, ultimately, if you search for that job on a job board, on a career site, et cetera, and you've put in keywords to find that job, you've used AI to find the job.
Yeah.
So you've used AI in the application process. So we're being facetious, but ultimately, you need to be more specific and you need to be transparent.
Two very, very good points, and this is one of the things that I feel that every employer should be doing is immediately updating their career site to be totally clear, and I like your points about that, which is you need first of all to be transparent. How are you using AI, as well as how
Absolutely.
you perceive that candidates may use AI in a good way. And I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that too, because part of that transparency and that clarity is also usefulness too, and being able to help candidates. Well, what does good look like in terms of using AI, and what does bad look like? Because I'm sure we've both heard these stories of recruiters going, oh, it was so obvious that somebody used AI.
The human AI detector.
Exactly. Yes, so we left the human AI detector, so I was able to chuck it out.
Yeah.
But if you didn't give the candidate guidance on what good or bad looks like, it seems totally unfair to me that you're chucking something out just because you feel.
Yeah, because it had an Oxford comma in the wrong place.
Yes, well, exactly, that's right. Or a dash,
Yeah,
you're right. That's
yeah.
a funny thing, or a Z
Yeah.
in its spelling wrong.
Yeah, it's true, and I think that that's one of the biggest issues. AI is a really interesting topic right now, and I think that our industry has probably talked about it more than any other industry, and I'm not sure why, because it affects lots of other industries as well. But at the same time, something I said yesterday in one of my articles was we have to remember that recruiters aren't gatekeepers. They shouldn't be gatekeepers. They should be enabling talent that's coming into the organisation, or enabling the organisation to have the best talent possible. So when you've got people sitting there going, I can look at a CV and I know whether or not somebody has used AI, and I chuck it out. It's like the old story in recruitment saying, oh, I just pick up 50% of all the CVs and shove them in the bin to get rid of the unlucky people.
Totally random.
Totally random and totally ridiculous, to be honest with you. And so that's one of the biggest things that I talk to people about is how do you know what good looks like? And so I think it's important to agree internally. I talk about this when I talk about AI governance in organizations. There's transparency, there's communication, but there's also agreement, internal agreement on what you're going to do about it, and then transparency and communicating that out. I go back to, people building websites, and ultimately they're still, it's still a window into your organization.
Yes.
Is a website or a chatbot or anything like that outside of recruitment. And people in certain parts of the world, in the UK, Europe, and what have you, we have to put privacy policies. We have to put cookie banners. We have to tell people how we're using the way that they interact with the website, and we need to tell them what they can expect in terms of their data and how we expect them to use it and all those kind of things. And the same should just be based up. It should be for recruitment. It's not I don't think it's a difficult thing to work out and decide upon. I think that if we have to do it for, let's say you're a retailer and somebody comes onto your website and you say, okay, well, we collect your cookies, this is what we do with your data, et cetera, why can't we just do that with our recruitment process?
Really, really good thought. And I like your point around governance, because we're so used to governance. We have governance on so many other important things. Why would we not have some governance on AI? And we certainly internally have now seemed to have come to an agreement of what good and bad use of AI looks like. So why do we not think about that on our websites too? And I think that's a great piece of advice for people, is thinking that we need to have AI governance around our recruitment process. So that really puts to bed, I suppose, that middle camp of freeze, not doing anything, because actually that's a disaster as well, because then candidates don't know one way or the other. So you get some people that have an advantage, other people who are conscientious and therefore have a disadvantage because they're not clear of whether it's good to use AI or not. So saying nothing for me is as bad as saying any use of it is wrong. So you're left then with, ultimately you just have to embrace it.
Yeah.
And so the embracing bit comes in two bits. One is clarity on the website, good use, bad use, and you've shared a bit on that. But then does it also now change what are the things we should be looking for from people too? Because the things that we used to value in the past, your ability to memorize information, to process it, to summarize it, which seemed to be good human cognitive skills amongst others, but these were things that we used to value. Now AI does that better. So there's an opportunity, I suppose, to think not just how we assess, but what we assess for. And do you have some thoughts about, people are going to go in and be using AI in the workplace?
Yeah.
What are the different kind of things that companies might be thinking about that they should be trying to understand about people when they're recruiting them?
I think if we focus purely on the AI piece, this is this was the catalyst for Genesys and for co-founding Genesys, which was that we've got this big chasm in most organisations, which is the top C-suite have agreed to invest in AI tooling across the organisation. So we know from all different pieces of research that organisations now want people coming in who are able to use AI tools.
Yes.
But then we've got right at the bottom of the organisation, the people that are bringing those people in, the recruiters who don't know how to assess for it, and there's no standardised way of doing that, and the stories that I hear are people looking at a prompt, write down a prompt for me on this, and it's literally handwritten prompt, looking at it going, yeah, that looks about right. There's no standardized way of doing that, and there's no standardized way of knowing what good prompts are and look like. And so that's what we're trying to do with Genesys, is say to an organization, here's an AI tool that you can give your candidates use of. It's a role specific and organization specific scenario. It could be, from a marketing perspective, use this generative AI tool to create a 6-month campaign for a new product we're launching or something. And it's about watching how people interact with that tool, and not just the output, not just here's the 6-month plan, or even here's the prompt I used. It's saying, we need to think about generative AI as a tool, but also based on the fact, like you said, it's better at taking information, regurgitating it, etc., etc., etc. We always need to think about it as a work buddy, co-pilot, whatever you want to call it. And so when you've got an intern or somebody sitting next to you, you don't just go off and do it. You coach them. You talk about, here's how I want you to think about it. Here's how I want you to look. Here's what I want the work to come back to look like. All those kind of things. So you're delegating tasks properly. And so when you're asking people to demonstrate their usage of generative AI, you need to look at not just the prompt they're using or the output. You need to look at whether they're actually productive using it, whether they can problem solve, whether they can communicate, delegate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was the catalyst behind Genesys, was, can we get people coming into an organization who can demonstrate that they can be more productive using generative AI tooling?
Okay. That strikes me as being incredibly powerful. Is everybody's running around now thinking about how they're going to use generative AI tools once they're in an organization to make themselves more productive. So how did you go about standardizing? I suppose, so does Genesys give a score or a rating, I suppose, about somebody's generative AI prompting skills?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So without going into the secret sauce, I've been, because of my background, I have been working with language models longer than ChatGPT's been around. And so when we were working with GPT-2 and GPT-3 back in 2020, you had to prompt engineer. And prompt engineering isn't what people think it is nowadays. Prompt design and conversational prompting tends to be what we do now. But there is a tried and tested methodology around that. And so over 4 years of doing this, I've created my own, dare I say, proprietary way of prompting a generative AI tool or a language model, which works brilliantly. And so when I'm out training people in how to use this, I go through the same model with them. And so that's the model that sits within Genesys.
Nice.
And against each of the areas of that prompting model, you're given a score to say, but the score isn't just this is how you scored against it. It's also saying, here's how you could have done it better.
Brilliant.
Here's how you can take our prompting model, and here's how you can make your prompting better. Here's how you can get more out of the system. So it's not just about assessment, it's about enablement. And for me, that's the most important part, because nobody knows what right or wrong is nowadays. So assessing people means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Because you're just saying to somebody, yeah, great, they can prompt, they can use that tool, et cetera, and so that's great. But actually, if we're saying we've benchmarked how well they're doing and we're giving them the opportunity to get better as part of it. And so for me, enablement's much more important than assessment.
Love that. And I suppose that's part of how, when you look at something that's a real challenge, you can approach it in two ways. One is to go, oh my goodness, this is going to be really scary, and put the barriers up, or you can embrace it and say, okay, how do we now use this for our benefit?
Yeah.
And I suppose one of the things that we've increasingly done in the last 5-10 years or so is think about the candidate experience and candidate feedback. And we're in big danger with the introduction of AI of reversing a lot of that unless you start thinking about, okay, how do we lean into this?
Yep.
And how do we bring it into the process, assess people, but at the same time help them upskill too, because we know that's going to be so important. So I really, really like your approach there. And so just as one final point on that, that's something you're encouraging organizations to think about and enable them, I suppose, to bring this into the process. And I assume that gets done in like an assessment center or a face-to-face interview.
Yeah, it can be done wherever. Ultimately, it's a solution that can be done online anywhere.
Okay.
Because you're not relying on third-party tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or what have you. It's all inside the platform.
Yes.
But yes, the people that are currently showing interest in it are very much on the graduate hiring side of things, especially in professional services and legal firms where they are looking for people who can come in and use these tools and make themselves more productive. We saw in the Microsoft Work Trends report, I think it was 77% of leaders said that early career hires who are coming in who are able to take advantage of generative AI tools will be given more responsibility more quickly in the organization. Yes. So we know people want these skills, especially in the early careers side of things. So it's sitting quite nicely in the kind of assessment center space at the minute.
I really like, and because it's just such a good example, but it brings to life your point, because I hear lots of statements around, we need to use AI responsibly and ethically, and we need to ensure that the recruitment process stays human and doesn't get. And there's all these sort of very sort of standard phrases that get chucked out. And so when you initially said all recruiters should be enablers rather than gatekeepers, I'm sure a few people have thought, this is just another one of those phrases. But actually, you've really shown how a recruiter, if they think about it in the right way, can be an enabler for something that's really strategic and important for organizations, which is we need to bring people in with AI skills or with the ability to pick up AI skills really quickly. And so how does the recruitment process need to look to enable that? As opposed to we're just going to be a gatekeeper and go, this is going to be really, really tough. But once you're through the gate, you're into utopia. It just feels really
imbalanced.
Yes. Mad.
No,
so thank you for sharing that, and I think that just gives some really sort of practical ways that people could and should be embracing AI as part of their recruitment process. I'd like now to turn to something that you first alerted me to, which I thought was so brilliant in being able to clarify, I suppose, the big challenge around what people are worried about in introducing AI from a recruitment adoption point of view into the process as well, because we've got this sort of mass volume of applications. Recruiters are going to need to use some automation tools to deal with this. So that is a burning platform that everybody has to address. But the one thing that's holding a lot of the recruiters back is just what's the AI rules and legislation going to mean around this, and everybody's a little bit frightened. They're either sort of jumping in because they just want to it sounds a shiny new tool, or they're just holding back going, I don't know. And you introduce this concept of automated decision making as opposed to automated decision execution.
Yes.
And there's a nuance between those two, and I wonder if you could share that, because I think it's a really important two sets of phrases that most recruiters probably haven't even thought about and don't understand.
No, and the reason behind that piece of content that I put out was because when I'm having a lot of conversations, I have a lot of conversations with recruiters and HR leaders about bringing in AI tools, and immediately it's what does the EU AI Act say about this? And I push back and I say, well, what does GDPR say about this? Because we seem to have had this, and I call it a cognitive reset around bringing in technology. So everybody's got ridiculously excited about AI, but they seem to have forgotten that we've had GDPR in place since 2018. And actually, there are parts of the GDPR which absolutely regulate AI from a decision-making perspective.
Right. Yes.
Which is you're not allowed to kind of automate, profiling and decision-making on people, for issues like employment. And so I wanted to help people understand that you can still bring in an AI tool and have it help you automate the screening process without being breaching GDPR or even potentially breaching the EU AI Act, which is still 2 years away in terms of enactment under the high-risk stuff of employment, or less than 2 years now, but you know what I mean. So I wanted to explain the difference between automated decision making and automated decision execution, because execution is absolutely allowed under GDPR and also under most of the other regulation. The key difference is that automated decision execution is a tool, whether it be AI or automation, making a decision based on the rules that you've given it, and that's it.
Right. So the human sets the parameters.
Exactly.
And can be accountable, auditable for that.
Yes. And so, back to kind of, the old decision tree chatbots that we used to build, back in 2016, 2017, they were perfect because they were decision trees. They were follow this path because this is the path I've set you. And if you get out at the other end, you can have a job because I've set the parameters on how you go through this screening. If you answer the question, blah, blah, blah. And it could be very binary. It could be, can you lift 25 kilos, et cetera, et cetera. But you're having something help you make that screening process quicker by just implementing the same decision-making route that you have made.
Yes, you could have asked it as a person.
Exactly. So you're just automating your thought process and the way that you'd make those decisions. So decision execution. Automated decision making relies on ultimately the AI making its own decision on who is and is not relevant for a role. And that comes down to a lot more issues around transparency. Again, we talk about transparency a lot, but if I go back to some of the concerns that I have around people using things like ChatGPT to screen CVs,
I know.
There's no. Can you explain how that black box of OpenAI makes that decision? No, you can't. But you've allowed an AI to automate the decision making for you.
Yes.
You can't explain it. You've allowed it to do that. And so it's not explainable. We talk about explainable AI. It's not transparent because you can't tell anybody how the algorithm works. And you've breached it. You've breached a lot of the regulations out there by allowing an AI tool to make a decision that you are not in control of.
Yes. And that's such an important thing to understand, because some people will be saying, yeah, but hang on, I'm the user in all of this. I set the prompts up. Here are the CVs. This is what I like to look for in a CV.
Yeah.
And tell me which of the CVs or rank them based on what I have given as an input.
Yeah.
So on the surface, that feels as if it's automated decision execution because I'm the one that's setting the parameters. But if I understand you correctly on that, I think the transparency and the explainability is not there because you are then relying on ChatGPT and its training data, which you don't know and don't understand, to then give you...
Prompting is not setting the algorithm up.
No,
ultimately.
No, that's right.
And the pushback on that is if you go on to ChatGPT and you ask it to design an image within and you give it the prompt on what that image looks like, does it come out 100% as you're expecting it to?
No, exactly.
So you're not in control, ultimately.
Right.
You're in control of giving the instruction, but you're not in control of how they decipher that instruction and follow it through.
Yes.
And that's the biggest challenge that you have to that. Just because you're prompting something, it doesn't mean that you're in control of that algorithm.
And that's so important to understand, because there's lots of, if you think now within the recruitment world, we've got ATSs that are saying they're using AI. Mm-hmm. You've got things like Eightfold AI that's out there saying that they're going to be able to do, sourcing and matching and there's a lot of automation
Yeah.
that's being put forward as to save time to deal with this sort of deluge of applications.
Yes.
But I don't think many people in the HR world, because it's so fast moving, are equipped or skilled at the moment to be able to ask the right questions.
Yep.
Which is why I think if you just get your mind around the difference between automated decision making versus automated decision execution,
Yes.
you've got a really good framework,
Yeah.
I suppose, from them being able to then say, okay, where does this fit, and therefore, am I safe or am I not safe?
Yeah, exactly. And we can go back, pre kind of Gen AI hype to the litigation that happened with HireView, where
Yes.
they were making decisions based on
Facial
people's
recognition, wasn't it?
how people were responding facially to questions and what have you, and there was no explainability. It was a black box, and that was the biggest issue from a litigation perspective. There was no explainability on how those decisions were being made.
Yes.
And so, yeah, absolutely. If you have in front of you the difference between decision execution and decision making, that's a good starting place to say to a vendor, can you explain to me how you cover both of those?
And just one final point on that explainability. You and I both know, because we've been around the block on this a few times, that the number of times we've seen tech providers go, yes, I've trained this on thousands of CVs or thousands of interviews, and because the number is large, therefore there's an assumption that, you've got the explainability and the justification for it, when in fact it's just a large set of data points, and those data points could be full of bias.
Absolutely.
And so just having a large number that something has been trained on is not actually particularly special.
No, I mean, ChatGPT or GPT-4o was trained on billions, if not trillions of data points, and it's not perfect. It still hallucinates. So you can't base you can't base the way that your AI works, or at least the performance of your AI, on how many data points it was trained on. And so again, are you in control of the algorithm? Are you able to ensure that it's making decisions in the way that you would as a human? Does it remove bias? All those kind of things. That's why I think I recently met with a company called Warden.ai, who are doing automated bias checking within HR tech systems, and I think it's a necessity. Ultimately, I actually think it's a necessity for TA teams and HR teams to also use those kind of tools, because one of the things that people again aren't ready for is the fact that, especially the EU AI Act, there are responsibilities not just for providers of the technology, but people who are putting that technology out in the public, which are recruiters and HR teams. So I think we need to very, very quickly understand that we have responsibility from TA team perspective to make sure that we are also ensuring that the AI that we are implementing is explainable, is transparent. We talk about responsible AI, but I also talk about relevant AI. There's no point in putting AI in just for AI's sake.
Yes.
Is it doing something? Is it solving a problem? Is it making things better? Is it relevant? So we've got a handful of things we need to make sure of, and I think having some kind of automated bias checking is absolutely important.
Yeah, and really good, I think, final advice for everyone on this, because it's easy to say, embrace AI, and then everybody goes, well, yeah, look what happened to Amazon when they first tried to do this. Look what happened to HireView when they first tried to do this. You setting yourself up for a tiger trap somewhere there. And I think your guidance then is really, you do have to understand it. You've got to understand how it's relevant. You have to understand how it's explainable and transparent. And then I like your suggestion there too about that you also need to think about how you audit all parts of the process. But I suppose one final question then. Are you Are you ultimately where's your view on AI? Do you think this is going to move recruitment forward, or because we seem to be at a pivot point now where there's a lot of things we've just talked about that means that there are as many tiger traps as there are sort of step ladders?
Yeah, I think that I think recruitment is going to change. I think it has to change ultimately. I think that I think there's lots of variables happening right now that are going to mean that the next 5 to 10 years is going to be a transformational time when it comes to recruiting people into an organisation. Whether that be the change in the shifting generations in the workplace, which means we've got different desires and different needs when it comes to the way that we're engaged with and the way that we even look at an organisation. But we've also got this challenge of, we're in an interesting global situation now where the last 18 months has been really difficult economically. Lots of people have lost their jobs, and dare I say it, the bounce back that people are waiting for probably won't happen. I think this is the norm now, where there's going to be less recruitment jobs out there, which means that recruitment teams have to do more with less.
Yes.
Which means that automation is going to be rife. And I think that the responsibility of implementing that automation will be on the recruiters. So they will be masters of it, but they need to make sure they're doing it properly. So yeah, I think that recruitment is going to change significantly because AI is going to get rid of a lot of the admin and a lot of the data roles that we do, a lot of the decision making, a lot of the collateral creating, and it's going to leave us with less to do as recruiters, but more high value work, the relationship building, the reasoning, all those kind of things that AI isn't great at yet. But I think recruitment's in for a massive transformation over the next 5 to 10 years.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We've got to get ready for the new normal.
Absolutely. A pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks a lot.